Hey, I'm Max and welcome to my Unity Basics video. Today I'll show you the basics about making a functioning UI. Let's not waste any time and get straight into it. To create a UI, you need to go on your main camera, right click and go into UI and then create something you want. And by default it will create a canvas with the thing that you created inside it. If you want, you can also create the canvas directly, but let's say I click button, you can see it create a canvas and a button. The reason why we put it as a child of the camera is because when the camera moves, we also want the UI to move. So now if I double click on my canvas, you can see it's huge. That's normal because the canvas is the size of the screen. Also, if your canvas is vertical or horizontal and you want it the other way, let's say you're making a vertical mobile game and by default it's horizontal, you can go into your game here and change the size to, let's say, portrait, and then your canvas should change to portrait. Now I have my default button that I just created. I can rename it to something like a change color or whatever you want to call it. I can drag to make it bigger, hold shift to keep the ratio. In my case I don't want to keep the ratio, I want to do something like this. Put it at the top left, and by default the button will have a text under it, so I'll just call it color, and I'll increase the font size to something like 60. So you can mess with the parameters yourself, like the fonts and the colors. Let's say here I could change the color of the text to yellow or green. A really important thing if you're using buttons is to go onto the button game object and go on the button component, and at the bottom you'll see on click, and on there you can click the little plus to add an event and then dragging any object and select a function from the scripts on it. So let's say I drag my game object here onto the on-click object, and now I can go onto every script that attached to my object. So here on my game object I have the screenshot and the save manager. So if I go here I can see save manager and screenshot, and I could call, for example, take a screenshot or save data or load data. So let's say here I do take screenshot, and over here in my take screenshot method I'll just do to test a little log button clicked. So now that my button is linked to the take screenshot, if I run the game and I click on the button, it says in the console button clicked. Another useful component is, let's say you create a image and you want to know when that image is being dragged on or clicked or something like that. You could add a button, but in some cases, for example, if you want to detect drags, a button cannot do that, so you can instead add a event trigger, add a new event type, and add something like drag or scroll. So let's say I do drag, I add an event just like the button, and I'll add my take screenshot as well. And now if I drag on that image, it spams it in the console. As you can see, it spammed it 105 times. You can of course change that image to whatever you want, either by dragging a sprite in or clicking the little thing next to it and changing it here. And that's pretty much all the basics you need to know to start making some UIs. Just put your image, your buttons, maybe some event triggers if you need. Another very important thing though is to make sure that it works on every platform. So you can see here it works perfectly. My button is at the top left and my image at the top right. But if I change my resolution here to a larger resolution, you can see that there's some space left on the left and the right. And if I change it to a smaller one, you can see that it cuts off the button and the image. To make sure that it works on every resolution the same and even every aspect ratio, we can change the anchors and the canvas scale mode. So if I click on my canvas here, I can see in the canvas scaler it's constant pixel size. I can instead change it to scale with screen size. I can put in a reference resolution, let's say 1920 by 1080. And I can choose to match the width or the height. So if you get a screen that's larger or higher, you can decide to match the width or the height. Now I'll replace my elements at the right spot. And now if I hit play and I change the resolution to something lower, you can see the elements stay at the same spot. But if I change the aspect ratio, you can see it still doesn't work perfectly. That's because the anchors of the object are still in the middle. You can see here in the red transform it's set at center, and you can see here in the middle a little thing to show you the anchor. So if instead I want this button to always be at the top left and this image to always be at the top right, I can change the anchor of the button to top left and the anchor of the image to the top right. And now if I run this and I change the aspect ratio, you can see it stays at the top left and top right. So now no matter what you set it at, it should always be at the top left and top right. Even if you change the aspect ratio a lot, like setting it to vertical instead of horizontal, they still stay at the top left and top right and everything still works the same. So really that's all you need to know to make your UI is you can add some text, images, buttons, but everything works pretty much the same. And the most important thing that I needed to know when I started and that I didn't know was how to change the canvas scaler and the anchors. So now that you know that, you know a lot more than I did when I started, so that's good for you. Thanks for watching, check out my other videos if you want some other tutorials, and subscribe if you want.